I want to talk about a relationship that defines most men, the relationship between fathers and sons. My dad was a hard man. He was born on June the 14th, 1917. Yesterday would have been his 108th birthday if he'd lived that long. He was first brought up during the Roaring '20s. Then as a teenager and a young man, he lived through the Depression and all the various things that occurred during the Depression. Then, of course, the war came. My father was exempted because he was a severe asthmatic and had other physical problems that would plague him throughout his life. Or as I like to put it sometimes, my father enjoyed poor health throughout his life. Most of us know somebody who's that way. For whatever reason, they enjoy being in poor health. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and in 1942, he enlisted, and he was taken because he could stay stateside, allowing some man to go work and fight on the battlefronts rather than do clerical work. He had a young family, my two older sisters, and he came out of the war, went into business, had a failure because he was a manufacturer's rep, and one of his major clients went bankrupt, owing him significant amount of money, which he then, over the next number of years, paid back in full, rather than taking bankruptcy or anything else. He then went to work in the family business, C.L. Frost and Son. C.L. Frost was actually Charles Lincoln Frost, who was my great-grandfather, and the son was Horace, but Horace was the one who founded the company. He went to work in the family business. And over the course of time, of course, other children were born. I came along in August of 1945, and my brother Dick came in 46. My sister Laura came in 49. My brother Jim came in 50. And last and not least, my sister Margaret came in 1952. 7 children in all. My mother loved my father. They both wanted to have a big family. They wanted to have 12 children, but they decided that they had to stop at 7 because that's all they figured they could support. My dad loved my mother, and he loved his family. And at the same time, not knowing what he was doing, nobody has a handbook for moms and dads. He managed to psychologically, not so much physically, but psychologically abuse his children. I can still remember to this day being at the dining room table. We always had dinner around 6 o'clock, all of us seated around the dinner table. And myself or one of my brothers and sisters would start to talk about something that was interesting to us or had happened during our day. And my father would look up and say, "Not of general interest," which meant it could not be talked about. He ran the conversations. I would have to say that my undying love and affection for the Tigers is partly a result of that, because Tiger baseball was something that could be talked about at the dining room table. And I followed the Tigers fiercely when I was young. He didn't mean to abuse us, but he did. And like in the song, it had to be his way. I remember as I was growing up, I recognized that I was an individual, not a person, not a number, nothing to be categorized. And in frustration to me one day when I was in high school, he said to me, "Chuck, why can't you be like all the other kids?" I looked at him and said, "Because I'm not." That was the start of a rift between my father and I. Over and over again, he would determine what the course was supposed to be, and I didn't go that course. I had a path that I was following, even if I didn't know where the road went. We have the opportunities in life to choose our own path, to follow our own road. And I did, for better or for worse, just that. I got married in 1976 to a woman he didn't approve of. Her mother didn't approve of me. We were even. Her father was dead. She'd been raised primarily by her mother. She had issues with her mother. I had issues with my father. We were a perfect dysfunctional couple. When my grandfather died in 1979, my mother said to my father, "Charlie, it's no longer a matter of if Chuck is going to move. It's a matter of when." And the following year, in the middle of the worst economy Michigan had known since the Depression, I sold my house, found a job in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as sales manager for a company, and my wife, who was trilingual, immediately got a job with a company that needed her language skills. They didn't care much about if she could do the secretarial stuff. They were interested in the language. So we moved, putting 1,000 miles between she and her mother and me and my father. And we carried them with us as states of mind. See, it isn't necessarily the proximity as it is how you feel about it, what you think about it. My father was convinced I was doing the wrong thing. He was convinced I couldn't sell the house. Sold the house quite easily, had done a lot of work on it, moved, found jobs. The jobs were there when we moved because we'd gone down a month earlier to get the jobs, to find them. Life progresses. You never get to go backwards. You only get to go forwards. I remember all too well life choices I made that he disagreed with. That was never the reason I did anything, although it was a bonus that he might not care for what the decision was. I usually found that out after the fact, sometimes quite verbally, and I proceeded down my own path. In 1987, the marriage ended in divorce. My father made sure that I knew it wasn't going to work, that he knew that it had been a mistake. There are no mistakes. There are only learning opportunities. I used to go up for a couple of weeks every summer to visit friends, including time with my mother and father. Did not do that for the following summer. So we get to 1989, and I'm on the phone with my mother. I'd called her to wish her happy Mother's Day. And at the end of the conversation, as my mother was prone to do, she threw in, "Oh, by the way, dear, your father was at the doctor this past week, and they've given him 6 months to live." I chatted for a moment more with my mother, hung off the phone, made sure the door to my office was closed, put my head on my arms, and I cried, and I cried. How dare he die without acknowledging my worth as a human being, without acknowledging me as an individual. And while I cried, I knew I had to do something, and I didn't know what. Now, we need to put this in context. This is 2 years after my divorce. I'd gone through therapy, neurolinguistic programming, and in fact had gotten certified in neurolinguistics, which technically made me a neurolinguistic therapist. And I was asked at times by the Unity Church I had joined to help other people see if I could help them, assist them with neurolinguistics since they were change resistant. And there I am in my office alone, crying, not knowing what to do next. I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know what it was. So we moved forward to that summer, and I did go up for 2 weeks. Several things were a little touchy between my father and I, as he reminded me of a couple of the women he approved of that I had let go. It's amazing, he always had to be right. I have a master's degree in American history, and the week before I was going to get my degree, I went home because I came up from Kalamazoo. I went to Western Michigan, and I came up because my board had told me, you're going to pass. Your thesis has been accepted. You really did a fine job in both the oral and written exam. You'll get your degree next week. Kind of cutting it close, but that's okay. So I called my mother and I said, I'd like to come home and tell you and Dad something. And she said, come on up, I'll throw another potato in the stew. And so I went up and I told them I was going to get my master's degree. They were both very happy. And in between the main course and the dessert, my mother went out to the kitchen and was scurrying around. And my father got to talking about the election. It was 1968. And in August of 1968, George Wallace, Richard Nixon, and Hubert Humphrey were all polling about 30%, with 10% undecided. And my father said to me, you know, if Wallace can hold up, he'll break all of the records that were set by Teddy Roosevelt. I looked at him and I said, if you're referring to the percentage of the vote, or you're referring to the electoral vote, you're correct. But if you're talking about the popular vote, you're incorrect. And he said, you're wrong. I said, no, Dad, I've been studying this stuff. It's what my degree is in. You're wrong. And I said, listen, in 1920, women were granted the right to vote. By 1924, there were more than twice as many people as had voted in 1912 in the election that Teddy Roosevelt ran as a bull moose. I got up from the table, went down to the basement. I knew where the encyclopedia was. The encyclopedia, that was before computers. You don't have anybody selling encyclopedias anymore. But I went down, opened it to U.S. elections, brought it up, laid it down in front of him, pointed at 1924, and a progressive Republican by the name of Battle Bob La Follette from Wisconsin had polled many more votes than Teddy had. He looked down, he said, oh, if you'd been sure, you would have bet me. Because he kept telling me, he finally said, put up or shut up, wise guy, I'll bet you $1,000. I said, I don't have $1,000, Dad, and I didn't come here to argue with you. That's when I went down and got the encyclopedia. He had to be right. If I had believed what I was saying, I would have bet him. That was his way of being right. The next week and a half passed. I was at my parents' a couple of times, spent time with friends, did some fishing. And when I'm leaving, that last evening, I had dinner with my parents again. And the conversation covered several different things. I really don't remember what. What I do remember is that I still was internally saying, what do I do? And I'm leaving their apartment, loaded down with presents from my birthday, a goodie bag for the ride home to Dallas that my mother gave me. And I get to the door and I'm saying, he's going to die. He has a bad heart. He has multiple things health-wise. What do I do? And suddenly I knew. And I dropped everything, letting it fall to the floor. And I turned around and I hugged my father. And I said, I want you to know that I love you very much. And I accept you for who and what you are. He looked puzzled, and then he looked at me and he said, well, that's good, because I'm not going to change. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking him to change. He missed the point, but he got the point. And over the next couple of years, I came and went from Grand Rapids a couple of different times, and we now get to 1991. My father had rallied a couple of times before. In 1989, he rallied because he always planned to live to be through his 50th wedding anniversary, which would have been in 1990. And then the next year he rallied because he loved Christmas. But I get there and I could see there would be no rally this time. No matter what I wanted, my father was going to die. I helped my mother during that summer. I had taken an apartment in Grand Rapids, sharing it with friends I'd had since college. And my father was so weak. It was sad to watch him declining. So I watch him when my mother goes to the store or to run errands. And one time, shortly before I was going to leave, a few days before actually, I'm once again dad sitting. And he'd taken what I lovingly called a practice nap. That was when he fell asleep when he was reading. As I get older, I begin to understand what practice naps are all about. They kind of sneak up on you. So he's there, the Wall Street Journal in his lap. I'm reading a book that I brought with me, and suddenly I hear chalk. I look up, I say, yeah, Pop. And my mind is moving as quickly as possible. I know where his insulin is. I know where his heart attack pills are. I know where his nitroglycerin is. I know where, a whole list. I knew where the oxygen was. I certainly knew how to dial 911 if I had to. He looked at me and he said, are you happy? It had never occurred to me that that was ever going to be a part of the dynamic between he and I. And I thought about it for a second and I said, yeah, Pop, I'm as happy as I know how to be. I'm doing the best that I can with the skills, the abilities, and the resources that I have, my knowledge of them and my ability to use them. Yeah, Pop, I'm as happy as I know how to be. That's good. And he leaned back and went back to sleep. A couple of days later, I left Grand Rapids knowing that I had seen my father alive for the last time. And when I was on the West Coast in November, I got word that my father had passed at the age of 74. My friends, never get to are you happy without first going through I love you and I accept you for who and what you are. Unconditional love. No questions, just love. The last 2 years of my father's life were so much different between he and I than everything before. And when he died, I was the only one of 7 children who was at peace with him. My father taught me to stand up on my own, even if he disagreed with it, but to stand up on my own, to think for myself, to be myself. And in the very end, my father taught me about unconditional love, loving without any expectations, without any barriers or conditions. Thanks, Dad. Amen.
Hey, it's Reverend Mike here. I just wanted to stop for a moment before you get on with your day and thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. It means the world to us, and I just wanted to let you know if there's anything that we can do to make your experience even better, please do not hesitate to reach out by going to our website. I also wanted to offer you the opportunity for us to get together and sit down so I could get to know you a little bit better and answer any questions that you have. I can either do that by either getting together in person, have a cup of coffee, or we can meet online via Zoom. If you're interested, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach me at michael@courage2thrive.com. And lastly, if you find these messages are helping you, we would be tremendously grateful if you'd consider donating to the center. The best and the easiest way to do that is simple. Just go to our website. Again, thank you so much. Hope you have a great day. Hope you're doing well. God bless, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye now.